What kind of girl leaves her last companion in the snow and walks away without looking back? The wind across northern New Mexico that winter of 1884 carried no mercy. It swept low over the prairie, scraping against frozen grass, crawling through seams in the land the way hunger crawls through a body that has gone too long without food. The moon hung thin and pale, a broken crescent barely strong enough to light the ground. It was under that light that Clara Whitmore walked alone, her bare feet numb, her breath shallow, each step a quiet argument with herself about whether she could take one more. She was 18, though hardship had pressed years into her face. Her coat was not truly a coat anymore, just layers of cloth stitched and restitched until warmth had become a memory rather than a function. In her arms, she carried a small bundle wrapped in a worn grain sack, held close to her chest as if she could will heat into it. Inside the sack, something trembled. Not from fear, but from hunger, from cold, from a body too small to fight winter on its own. The ranch gate loomed ahead, tall and dark against the open land. Blackwood Ranch. People in town spoke the name carefully, the way they did with places tied to power. It belonged to Ethan Blackwood, a man few knew well and fewer dared to test. Former cavalry, wealthy, alone. Clara had never seen him, but she had heard enough to know this was not a place where girls like her were meant to linger. She stopped at the gate and lowered herself slowly to her knees, the frozen ground biting into her skin. Her hands shook as she opened the sack. A small head emerged, ribs too visible beneath dull fur, eyes clouded with exhaustion. The puppy let out a sound that barely qualified as a whimper. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the word catching in her throat. She had said it too many times in her life, to too many people who never heard it. She took a scrap of paper from her pocket, edges torn, the writing uneven from cold fingers. "Please take care of him. His name is Buddy. I can't anymore." That was all. No explanation, no plea. She set the note beneath the sack, then placed the puppy gently against the gate where the wood blocked some of the wind. Buddy licked her fingers weakly. The warmth of his tongue burned more than the cold. For a moment, she almost picked him back up. Almost. But she knew what would happen if she did. He would starve with her. He would shiver beside her at night until his small body gave out. Love had limits when there was nothing left to give. Clara stood, wiped her hands on her skirt as if to erase the moment, and turned away. She took 3 steps before a voice stopped her. "That dog won't last the night." It was not loud. It did not need to be. The words cut through the wind with a calm certainty that made her spine lock in place. She turned slowly. A figure stood a few paces away, half shadowed by the barn, tall enough that the moon caught the line of his shoulders. He wore a heavy sheepskin duster, old but well cared for, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. His face was scarred, not brutally, but enough to suggest a life that had not been gentle. Ethan Blackwood. He stepped closer, boots steady on the frozen ground. His eyes were a cold gray, the kind that measured before they judged. He looked at the puppy first, then at Clara, taking in her bare feet, her hollow cheeks, the way she stood as if ready to bolt. "You leaving him?" he asked. She swallowed. "Yes." "For good?" "Yes." The puppy whimpered again, and she flinched as if struck. Ethan bent, lifted the small body with surprising care, and held it against his chest. The animal went still almost instantly, as if recognizing warmth when it touched it. "You love him," Ethan said, not a question. Clara nodded, her jaw tight. "That's why I'm leaving him." He studied her for a long moment. The wind pulled at his coat. Somewhere in the distance, a fence creaked. Finally, he spoke again. "Some gifts in this world," he said, "aren't meant to be sold, and they sure as hell aren't meant to be abandoned." Her eyes burned. "I didn't abandon him," she said, sharper than she intended. "I ran out of food. I ran out of time." Ethan's gaze softened, just enough to change the air between them. He looked down at the puppy, then back at her. "If he stays," he said, "you stay." She laughed once, a sound brittle and empty. "I don't belong here." Didn't say you did, he replied. Said you could come inside. Inside. The word felt dangerous. Warmth always did. She hesitated, the instinct to refuse rising strong, trained by years of learning that nothing given freely stayed that way. Ethan turned toward the house without waiting for her answer. It's cold, he said over his shoulder. Decide quick. She followed. The kitchen smelled of smoke and old coffee, of iron and wood and something steady. The stove crackled, flames bright behind its small door. Ethan set Buddy down near the heat, poured milk into a tin saucer, and watched as the puppy drank with desperate focus. Clara stood just inside the door, hands clasped tight in front of her, afraid that if she moved, the floor might disappear. Ethan handed her a cup of warm milk and a piece of cornbread without comment. She took them slowly, fingers brushing his for a brief second. The heat seeped into her palms, into her chest. She ate in silence, tears slipping down her face without sound, each swallow a reminder of how long it had been since anyone had offered her anything without asking what it cost. He did not question her. He did not ask where she came from or what she wanted. He simply sat at the table, watching the fire, keeping the space steady while the night pressed against the walls. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara Whitmore was warm, and she did not yet know that this night, the one she thought marked the end of something, was only the beginning. Morning came quietly, without announcement. No gunshots in the distance, no shouting voices, no slammed doors, just light slipping through the frost-blurred window and the low sound of horses shifting outside. Clara woke with her body tense, the way it always was when she slept somewhere unfamiliar, but nothing rushed at her. The ceiling above her was low and wooden, the boards dark with age. A blanket heavy enough to matter lay over her shoulders. For several seconds she did not move, afraid that if she did, the room would vanish and she would be back on the road, cold and counting steps again. When she finally sat up, the ache in her feet reminded her she was still herself. Still poor, still cautious, but warm. The loft room was small and plain. A narrow bed, a wash basin, a chair with one leg shorter than the others. No lock on the door. That detail stayed with her. She dressed quickly, hands clumsy from the lingering cold in her fingers, and made her way downstairs. The smell of bread greeted her before she reached the kitchen. Mrs. Caldwell stood at the counter, sleeves rolled, her gray hair pinned tight as if disorder might offend her personally. She glanced up once when Clara entered, eyes sharp, assessing. "You're up," she said, not unkindly, not welcoming either, just factual. "Yes, ma'am. There's bread on the table. Eat. Then we'll see what you're good for." Clara nodded and sat where she was told. She ate slowly, waiting for the catch that never came. No questions, no suspicion, just expectation. Afterward, Mrs. Caldwell handed her a bucket and pointed toward the back door. "Eggs first. Don't drop them. Mr. Blackwood doesn't like waste." The work was simple, but it was work that made sense. Gather eggs, stoke the stove, wash vegetables in cold water that burned her hands awake. Brush the horses until their coats shone and their breathing slowed. The rhythm of it grounded her. By midday, her muscles ached in a way that felt earned, not desperate. Ethan Blackwood did not hover. He moved through the ranch with quiet authority, nodding once when he passed her, nothing more. Buddy followed him everywhere, now fed, now alive. The change so fast it felt unreal. Seeing the puppy stumble after him, tail wagging despite everything, loosened something in her chest she hadn't known was clenched. That evening, as the light faded and the stove crackled again, Clara found herself sitting at the kitchen table across from Ethan without having planned it. Mrs. Caldwell had retired upstairs. The space between them was comfortable, which made her uneasy. "You don't ask much," she said finally. "I ask when it matters," Ethan replied. She nodded, staring into her cup. "It always matters," she said quietly. He waited. The story came out uneven at first, the way truth often does when it hasn't been given room before. Her father, Thomas, once skilled with his hands, once proud, Then the drought. Then the fire. The shop gone. The drinking started slow and ended loud. The gambling. The nights she learned to listen for footsteps, to judge the angle of his shoulders before he spoke. Her mother, Margaret, coughing blood into rags they washed and reused until they fell apart. Clara selling chairs, tools, plates. Then selling time. Selling herself to work that broke her back for pennies. Buddy had been a gift, she said. Something warm for her mother's feet at night. He became hers instead, because he listened without judgment. Because he stayed. Ethan did not interrupt. When she finished, there was silence, but it was not heavy. He stood, poured her more milk, slid the cup back to her. "You can stay," he said again, as if repetition mattered. "Long as you want." Days passed. Trust did not arrive all at once. It crept in through habits, through knowing when supper would be, through finding clean water without asking, through the way Ethan left small things where she would find them. Gloves, a scarf, a piece of cornbread wrapped in cloth by her door. One night she noticed the tear in his coat. The seam split where it had been mended before. She didn't ask permission. She just fixed it. Red thread was all she had. When she handed it back, he looked at it for a long moment, fingers tracing the stitches. "Don't like red," he said. She stiffened. "I can redo it." He shook his head. "No, it's fine." That was the first time she saw him smile. Not fully, just enough. She kept her secret as long as she could. The food she tucked away at night. The careful steps she took after dark. It ended the way secrets usually do. With him knowing already. "She's not safe there," Ethan said after she told him. "I know. She can be here." Clara shook her head. "I owe you too much already." He leaned back, eyes distant. "Someone once gave me a place to land," he said. "Didn't ask for anything. Didn't take anything either. This is me paying that forward." It took another week before she brought her mother. Margaret Whitmore arrived thin and pale, her eyes too large for her face. She cried when she touched clean sheets, when she drank tea that didn't taste like rust, when she slept without coughing through the night. Clara watched her breathe and felt the shape of her life shift again. The knock came 2 days later. Thomas Whitmore stood at the gate, drunk and loud, calling her name as if it were still his to use. Ethan met him outside. There were no raised voices, just words laid down carefully. "She's not yours anymore," Ethan said. Thomas laughed, ugly and brittle. "She never was yours." Ethan's voice didn't change. "I never claimed her." Thomas left, threats dissolving as he went. That night, Clara cried until there was nothing left. Ethan sat with her until sleep came. She did not dream of running. The sound of a wagon on frozen ground carried farther than it should have. Clara heard it before she saw it, before the dogs stirred, before Mrs. Caldwell looked up from the stove with a frown that tightened her mouth. The rhythm was wrong. Too fast, too careless, metal rattling where it should have been quiet. Clara's hand stilled around the bowl she was drying. Her chest tightened in a way she knew too well. Ethan was already moving. By the time the wagon lurched into view beyond the gate, Clara's mother was resting in the small room off the kitchen, bundled in clean blankets, her breathing shallow but steady. It had been 3 nights since Margaret Whitmore slept without coughing herself awake. 3 mornings since she'd woken with color faintly returning to her cheeks. Safety had a smell, Clara had realized. Soap, wood smoke, tea, and it was fragile. It could be shattered by one voice. Thomas Whitmore shouted her name like a summons. He stood unsteady in the wagon, coat open despite the cold, eyes glassy with drink and something sharper beneath it. He saw the house, the barn, the order of the place, and his mouth twisted. "There you are," he called, hiding. Ethan stopped at the gate and did not open it. He planted his boots and waited. The stillness of him was deliberate, like a line drawn in the dirt. "This is private land," Ethan said. "State your business." Thomas laughed, a harsh sound that cracked in the cold. "My business is my daughter and my wife. You think you can take what's mine?" Clara stepped onto the porch before anyone could stop her. The air felt thinner with every step. She stood beside Ethan, not behind him, though her legs trembled. Thomas's gaze snapped to her, hungry and furious all at once. "You think you're better now?" he sneered. "Sleeping in silk sheets? Letting some rancher buy you?" Ethan's voice cut in, low and even. "You'll watch how you speak." Thomas spat into the dirt. "Or what?" "Or you'll leave." The men faced each other across the gate. Clara felt the past pressing against her back, the nights of shouting, the smell of liquor, the sound of breaking things. She opened her mouth to speak and found her voice steadier than she expected. "She's here because she needs care," Clara said. "Because I asked." Thomas's eyes flicked toward the house. "She doesn't know what's good for her. Never did." "That's enough," Ethan said. He opened the gate just enough to step through, closing it again behind him. He did not raise his hands. He did not touch Thomas. He stood close enough that the truth of his presence was undeniable. "You don't own her," Ethan said. "You never did." Thomas's laughter faltered. "She's my blood." "Blood doesn't give you the right to break someone," Ethan replied, "or to take from them when they have nothing left." Thomas swayed, anger flaring bright and then dimming. "You can't keep her," he said. "Law's on my side." Ethan nodded once. "Then bring the law. Until then, you're done here." Silence stretched. The wind moved through the fence posts. Somewhere behind them, a door creaked as Mrs. Caldwell watched from the shadows, arms crossed, unyielding. Thomas's shoulders sagged, just slightly. The threat drained out of him, leaving only bitterness. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "Both of you." He climbed back into the wagon and drove away, the sound fading until the land swallowed it whole. Clara stood frozen long after he was gone. Her knees buckled without warning, and she would have fallen if Ethan hadn't caught her elbow. He guided her inside, sat her at the table, poured water she barely tasted. When the shaking passed, it left exhaustion in its wake, deep and bone-heavy. "I didn't know it could end like that," she said, staring at her hands. Ethan sat across from her. "It didn't end," he said. "It changed." That night Margaret woke and asked where Thomas was. Clara told her the truth. Not all of it. Just enough. Her mother closed her eyes, relief and grief crossing her face in equal measure. "Stay," Margaret whispered. "Please." Clara squeezed her hand. "I am." The days that followed felt suspended, as if the ranch itself were holding its breath. Clara worked, ate, slept, but her mind kept circling the gate, the way Ethan had stood between her and the past without violence, without spectacle. The power of it settled slowly. She was not claimed, she was not traded, she had been defended. The storm came on the fourth night. Rain lashed the roof, sudden and loud, turning the yard to mud. A loose board banged against the barn. Ethan went to secure it. Clara followed without thinking. The rain soaked them both in seconds, hair plastered, boots slipping. Inside the barn, the noise softened. Water dripped from beams. The smell of hay and wet leather filled the space. Clara reached out, wiped mud from Ethan's cheek with her sleeve. The gesture surprised them both. He looked at her then, really looked, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, respect, restraint. He leaned in first, slow enough that she could stop him. She didn't. The kiss was brief, tentative, more question than answer. After, he pulled back. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm here." When the rain eased, they walked back without speaking. The house glowed ahead, steady and warm. Clara paused at the door, hand on the frame, and felt the weight of what she had lost and what she had gained settle into place. For the first time, the past knocked and did not come in. The storm did not leave all at once. It lingered in the ground, in the air, in the way the sky stayed low and gray for days afterward, as if the land itself needed time to settle. Mud clung to boots. The creek ran louder than usual. Clara noticed these things the way she noticed her own breathing now, carefully, consciously, as if every detail mattered because it meant she was still here. She expected regret to come. It didn't. What came instead was a quiet unease, not about what had happened in the barn, but about what it meant. Clara had spent her life reacting, moving when pushed, leaving when staying became dangerous, surviving by knowing when to disappear. Choice had never been something she trusted. It had always come with consequences she couldn't afford, and yet she had chosen not to pull away. She had chosen not to run. Ethan did not press her. The next morning he spoke to her the same way he always had, steady and direct, as if nothing fragile stood between them. That steadiness mattered more than any declaration could have. It told her that what had passed between them did not bind her. It did not trap her. It simply existed. Work resumed. Fence posts needed reinforcing after the rain. The horses grew restless, sensitive to the change in weather. Clara found herself laughing once, surprised by the sound, when Buddy chased his own tail through a puddle and fell flat. The sound startled her more than it did anyone else. She pressed her lips together afterward, as if laughter might cost her something. That evening, Ethan asked her to sit with him on the porch. He didn't phrase it as a question. The sun was setting, painting the wet land gold and rust. Clara sat a careful distance away, her hands folded in her lap. "You're not stuck here," he said after a while. She looked at him. "I know. If you decide to leave," he continued, "I'll make sure you have what you need." She nodded again, but something tightened in her chest. "And if I don't?" "Then you stay," he said simply. The simplicity unsettled her. She searched his face for expectation, for ownership, for the shadow of a bargain. She found none. What she saw instead was patience, and something like restraint. A man who knew how easily power could be misused, and who refused to touch it that way. That night she dreamed of doors, some locked, some open, all of them waiting. The next test came quietly. Mrs. Caldwell told her a neighboring ranch needed help, temporary work that paid cash. "Would be good money," she said, watching Clara closely. "Could set you up proper." The offer was reasonable, sensible. It came with distance, with independence, with the promise of not owing anyone anything. Clara lay awake long after the house slept, turning it over in her mind. Leaving would be easy. She was good at leaving. Staying meant risk. Staying meant hope. At dawn, she went to the barn alone. The air was cold again, sharp enough to sting. She ran her hand along the wooden post where she'd stood during the storm, the grain rough beneath her fingers. The memory of Ethan's presence there was not loud. It didn't demand anything. It simply existed, like a steady weight. Ethan found her there. He didn't ask why she'd come. He leaned against the stall door and waited. "They offered me work," she said. He nodded. "You should take it if you want." "That's just it," she replied. "I don't know what I want." He studied her, then said, "What you want matters." The words landed harder than she expected. No one had ever said that to her without attaching a condition. She felt something shift inside her, slow but unmistakable. "I've been running my whole life," she said. "From hunger, from him, from the sound of my own name being called like a threat." "And now?" Ethan asked. "Now I don't hear that sound anymore," she said. "And I don't know who I am without it." Silence stretched between them, comfortable and heavy all at once. Buddy trotted over and settled at Clara's feet, warm and solid. "You don't have to decide today," Ethan said. She shook her head. "I do." She took a breath, deeper than any she could remember taking before. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Not because I can't, because I don't want to." Ethan didn't smile. He didn't move closer. He simply inclined his head, acknowledging her decision the way he acknowledged all things that mattered. "Then you stay," he said. "On your terms." Relief washed through her, followed by fear, then something quieter underneath both. Resolve. That night she packed nothing. She left her small bundle where it was. The choice felt final in a way that frightened her, but it also felt clean. Days turned into routine again, but the rhythm had changed. Clara found herself speaking more, asking questions, disagreeing once, surprised when Ethan listened. She helped Mrs. Caldwell with the accounts, learned which fences mattered and which could wait. She sat with her mother in the afternoons, reading aloud when Margaret's strength allowed, sharing silences when it didn't. One evening, as the light faded, Ethan handed her a small object wrapped in cloth. She stiffened, instinct flaring. He noticed and paused. "It's not a promise," he said. "Just a thing." She unwrapped it slowly. A simple wooden pendant, smooth and warm from his hands. Inside, carved carefully, were the words, "Buddy and you, always welcome." Her throat closed. She closed her fingers around it, grounding herself in its weight. "I'm not asking you to stay forever," he said. She met his gaze. "I know." She put the pendant on anyway. Outside, the land stretched wide and open, unchanged and unforgiving. Inside the house, the fire burned steady. Clara Whitmore sat at the table that night, listening to the sounds of a life she had chosen, and for the first time, staying felt stronger than running. Winter loosened its grip slowly, reluctantly, as if the land needed proof that warmth would stay before it surrendered the cold. By the time the ground softened enough for a shovel to bite without complaint, Ethan had already chosen the place. It lay at the southern edge of the ranch, where the wind broke against a low rise and the morning light arrived gently instead of all at once. Clara watched him pace the ground in silence, measuring distance with his steps, his mind already building something she could not yet fully imagine. He did not announce his intentions. He simply began. The cabin rose piece by piece, deliberate and unhurried. Ethan worked alone most mornings, his movements economical, practiced, as if this labor answered something older than words. Clara offered to help. He accepted without comment. She learned how to steady beams, how to hold a nail just long enough before pulling her fingers away, how to recognize when wood was sound and when it would split. They spoke little during those hours, but the silence was no longer empty. It held shared purpose. Margaret watched from the porch when her strength allowed. Wrapped in blankets, a cup of chamomile tea warming her hands, she followed the progress with quiet wonder. She slept better now, coughed less. Some mornings she even smiled before Clara spoke. Healing, Clara learned, did not arrive like a miracle. It came like this, slowly, earned. When the cabin was finished, it was modest. One room, a small stove, clean windows, a quilt folded at the foot of the bed, stitched by Mrs. Caldwell without ceremony. Ethan carried Margaret across the threshold himself, careful and steady. She touched the wall, then the table, as if memorizing proof that this place was real. "This is yours," Ethan said simply. Margaret's eyes filled. She reached for his hand. "You've given us more than we can ever repay." He shook his head. "That's not how this works." Life settled into something resembling peace. Clara moved between the house and the cabin with ease now, her steps no longer hesitant. She shared meals with her mother in the evenings, listened to stories from before the drought, before the fire, reclaiming pieces of a past that no longer hurt as sharply. Buddy grew strong and fearless, a constant presence, his joy uncomplicated. Ethan changed too, though he would have denied it. He stayed longer at the table, listened more than he spoke. Once, when Clara challenged a decision about a fence line, he reconsidered instead of dismissing her. The respect in that moment mattered more than affection ever could have. The pendant remained against her skin, a quiet reminder that belonging did not have to be loud to be real. On a clear evening near the end of winter, Clara stood at the edge of the field and watched the sun drop low. The land looked the same as it always had, vast, indifferent, but she no longer felt swallowed by it. Ethan joined her, close but not crowding. "You could still leave," he said, not for the first time. She looked at him. "You're still making sure I know." "Yes," she nodded. "Good." They stood together until the light faded. No promises spoken, none required. The family they had formed did not look like the ones people talked about in town. There were no ceremonies, no declarations, just choice. made again and again, quietly upheld. Later that night, Clara sat beside her mother's bed, listening to her breathe. Margaret reached out and took her hand. "You found your place," she whispered. Clara thought of the road, of the girl she had been, of the night she'd left a small bundle at a gate and believed she was giving something up forever. "No," she said gently. "I was welcomed." Outside, the ranch slept. Inside, the fire burned low and steady. Loss had brought them together. Protection had held them there. Love, earned and unforced, kept them whole. For the first time, Clara did not imagine leaving. She imagined tomorrow. The West has always been loud with stories of conquest, blood, and men who take what they want because they can. But some stories live quieter lives. They unfold in kitchens warmed by simple fires, in hands offered without demand, in doors left open instead of barred. This was one of those stories. Clara Whitmore did not arrive at Blackwood Ranch looking for salvation or love. She came there believing she had nothing left to give. What she found instead was space. To breathe, to choose, to become something more than what hardship had shaped her into. Ethan Blackwood did not rescue her. He did something far rarer. He made room and waited. Together they learned that family does not require blood, only commitment, that protection can exist without possession, that love, when it is real, does not rush or claim or demand. It stays, it listens, it holds steady. Somewhere on a quiet stretch of land in New Mexico, a small cabin stands against the wind, warmed by human care rather than fear. Inside it, lives continue. Not perfect, not untouched by pain, but safe enough to grow. And sometimes that is the truest kind of ending a story can offer. End of article. Good night.